Fellow horse nerds, rockers, Jarastafari. We are back on the half halt. This is our third in the series, and we are now talking about where did it go wrong? Because a lot of us have been taught, I know I was taught for quite a while, to crank the handbrake outside rein and step on the gas pedal at the same time, inside leg, rather than doing a softening diagonal aid, which is what we were talking about in the previous video with Gustav Steinbrecht in the 19th century. Somewhere in the 20th century, it kind of went weird. And we want to kind of examine a little bit why this happened, and then what can we do now to make sure that we don't fall into that trap. So just quick recap. In our first video, we were started in the 18th century, and we were talking about Monsieur François Robichon de la Guérinière and his contemporaries, and they were saying that the half halt's actually done on the inside rein or with the bridle hand, and it's an action like this, and it's a rebalancer, and it's a softener, and it's also helping the horse to sit a little bit, and the degrees to which you use it vary upon the type of horse that you've got. We examined this. You need to look at that first video. Then in the second video, we went 100 years later and we looked at Mr. Gustav Steinbrecht and him saying, well, now when you're preparing a horse in a snaffle or a double bridle and you've got two hands, you're going to work towards what's effectively using moments of shoulder in to make sure that you can both soften and balance your horse without interfering with the action of the hind legs and interfering with the shoulders. And we examined how that can be done. Now in this third one, how did it get to this weird thing where we went from these softening aids to these kind of crude aids? Well, a couple of things happened, and I think it's worth bearing this in mind. And you've got to divide the 20th century into two bits, before World War II and after World War II, right? So the warm blood comes into play, and the warm blood as we know it is not the same warm blood from 100 years ago, right? About 100 years ago, in the 1920s, we were looking at much lighter types of warm blood that were more like trichanas, which are much closer to thoroughbreds. And a lot of thoroughbreds were actually in international dressage. And international dressage competitions at the Olympic level and so on didn't necessarily have things like Piaffe Passage, high school airs, tempis, that sort of thing. All of these things crept in gradually through the centuries. It's worth getting on YouTube and looking at some tests on the Olympics from various decades of the 20th century. And what you're going to see is it kind of develops, and the horses get bigger, they get stronger, they get more powerful, and they get to move in a way that becomes more and more exaggerated. And the saddles change, and blocks are put into the saddles because the horses' backs become stiff and people need to kind of have some sort of stability, and it just starts to get more and more kind of crowd-pleasy with these really big movements. Now, it's not that a big movement is necessarily a wrong thing. If you would go back to our 18th century guys, and they're mostly working with Iberian horses or derivatives of Iberian horses, they love a lovely high action, but they're doing it in a very soft sort of way. They're not doing it with a lot of massive forward potential. So somewhere around World War II, unfortunately, it's a slightly dirty secret, a lot of agricultural experimentation of breeds took place at Buchenwald concentration camp, and where they had a lot of slave labor. And they weren't just developing horses there, they were also developing breeds of cattle, breeds of sheep, that sort of thing. And the FN, as we know it, which is the German national sort of federation for all things horse, kind of grew out of what happened after the war, where these horses that had been developed, sadly, under the Nazis, suddenly were being bred bigger and bigger, more and more powerful. And then later on, I think Richard will tell us how Dutch blood came in with carriage horses from there to again breed up the size, breed up the muscle, breed up the action. Now, it's not that any of those breeding things are necessarily bad in and of themselves, but there was a massive acceleration forward here in really changing the morphology of these horses so that even if you go back to the 1980s, you'll see really good riders like Rainer Klimke and Klaus Balkenhol riding very, very softly with very, very discreet, sort of very correct, but not spectacular movements. And then somewhere at the end of the 80s and into the 90s, it just goes a bit bananas. And nowadays, when we go and see many dressage, places, we see this half vault being done like almost like a handbrake on the outside rein, and like a with the spur and the inside leg at the same time. And this, of course, is not what either of these guys were talking about, and it doesn't need to be done like that. So I'm going to turn the floor over to Mr. Richard Williams, and the reason why you want to listen to the Reverend Williams is because he publishes all the old dead dude stuff, and we rely upon him because there's really only one publisher out there that's doing it. And I know I'm bigging up a publisher here, but they're not sponsoring this video series. It's just that we are relying on it, and he's not making any money out of it, poor guy. I know, because I had to feed him earlier. He hadn't eaten for days.
I had a hot dog.
He had a hot dog and half a pomegranate, So the poor man, dedicates his life to bringing these texts to us, but it means that he's really qualified to talk about them. He's also a very, very accomplished trainer and rider himself. I know this because he's been staying with me the last few days. We've been playing with my horses, and he's definitely been improving them and helping with that too. So he's a good dude to listen to. So, Richard, where did it kind of go wrong, and what can we do to not fall into that trap now?
No, that's a very loaded question. So my answer is not definitive. My answer is just circumstantial. It's just my experience. So I was actually there in 1984 when Dr. Klimke won the Olympics in Los Angeles. But
you were two then, right?
Yeah, I was two.
You were in your stroller.
I was just peeking out over the edge of it. But I do have a photographic memory even as a 2-year-old. So I watched that, but I also watched Otto Hofer, and I watched Christina Stuckelberger, and the other riders. So there was this general way of going that Dr. Klimke got the highest marks for. And I'll never forget his victory round when he came and did the giant lap around the outside of the dressage arena in Los Angeles. He put all 4 reins and the double bridle into one hand, and he had his hat off. Then it was a top hat, and he proceeded to execute exactly 100 one-tempi changes flawlessly. He did not do 101. He knew how to count. He did not do 98, and there was no 2 in there. There were exactly 100. And as opposed to, let's just go around and do a bunch of one-tempis until I, run out. And this, the crowd was like standing on its feet, cheering, and just, going basically wild. And it's in America, but they were very happy for a German to win. They were very happy because this was clearly,
good rider.
a beautiful relationship of horsemanship. And what it wasn't at the same time in the 80s, when I'm just speaking as an imported American. We had, if you're a member of AHSA, which is American Horse Show Association, we would get, AHSA magazine, and on the cover would be very often some saddlebred competition where the horse's eyes are bugging out and the ears are pricked forward and the back is dropped and the rider has hands like this and going up in the air, and the front legs are doing this, and the front legs are made to do that by various devices.
They call it soaring.
Yeah. Soaring, chains, I don't even know the name of them, but clappers that actually fall onto the hoof and create a reflex reaction to make the front legs go bigger. So the Germans were doing very, very well in this classical methodology, and you can go back and look at Dr. Klimke's teachers, Felix Birkner and so on. So he had big classical masters as his teachers. And then, at that time, the first 12 placers in the team competition of the Grand Prix test were the ones that were allowed to ride the Grand Prix special. And that determined the first 12 places of the individual competition. And I believe it was maybe even a combination of the Grand Prix score and the Grand Prix special score. But the musical freestyle was kind of a new thing at that time. I'm not even sure if it was even in that Olympics, but they started to weave the musical freestyle in about 1986. And originally, the musical freestyle was the booby prize. It was basically for the people who were placed 13th to 24th. So it was the second set. It's like, okay, you also ran, you also showed up, we'll let you do a little musical ditty. And then eventually, over the period of the 80s and 90s, different teams in, let's say, Holland and Germany, and people who weren't in the medals yet, they lobbied the FEI and the governing bodies to push the musical freestyle into the part of the championship qualifier, right? And how did they sell this? Well, first of all, they said, well, we need to get crowd support. We need to get bigger audiences. We had a big audience in Los Angeles, but it was the Olympics, right? And so what about all these other competitions? So we can get people excited, non-horsey people excited about attending this show if we put some music to it. So where have we seen this before? We saw this in the 19th century, in the Circus, when the French royalties' heads were either chopped off or they were dethroned. 1830, the end of the royalty in France.
Well, they did bring them back later, but yeah.
But what happened? What happened is the nouveau riche and the new industrialists that were becoming wealthy because they weren't being overtaxed by the royalty, they said, well, what we want our own thing. So they wanted to go and see horsemanship, but they didn't want to see anything that looked like what the kings were doing. So
the School of Versailles
had shut. The School of Versailles, going very slow, doing low crouches and getting paid to go extremely slowly. So they wanted to see more fantastic riding. So they favored the circuses on the Champs-Élysées. So at the circuses would be these fantastic airs, of which Baucher was also, Francois Baucher was an employee of the Franconi Circus. So they had to come up with new airs all the time to satisfy the hunger and the curiosity of the spectators. So we've already seen this happen. And where would Baucher get the...
He gives us the one-tempis, by the way, Mr. Baucher.
So how does Baucher come up with all of these new airs? He comes up with these new airs because he can't afford good horses, so he goes to the horse butcher. And he says, Mr. Butcher, how much money are you going to get for this horse? And the butcher says, so many francs per pound or per kilo. And he said, okay, I'll give you 1 more franc per kilo than what you would get from the meat vendor. And by the way, why did this horse end up here at the knackers? It's got good muscle, it's got good bone. Oh, well, it used to do, every time it saw a mud puddle, it would do a flying leap and leap 24 feet forward. And then the unexperienced rider or the layperson would fall over backwards and do a backward somersault and then fall off and break their neck. So he said, good, I'm glad I know this. So I'm going to turn that into an air, a special air, and then we're going to put it in the circus and then everyone will clap. And then the people having their wine and watching the circus will say, oh, Mr. Baucher is coming up with all this stuff. So the one-tempi changes, I would argue, was actually an evasion of a horse that actually just would not stay on the same lead. And so he said, okay, I can turn this into a new thing. I'll go around the piste, and I will make everyone think my horse is skipping and going this way, that way, this way, that, and it's very, very special. And now I'm going to train horses, not just the one that showed this to me as a possibility. I did have a student in South Carolina whose mare, when she got very, very straight and very, very upright and was not trained in tempi changes, would evade by doing single tempi changes. And I said, you need to train that horse to Grand Prix because she already has this as an evasion. So then the trick for
Who
her...
was it who said, always train your horse through his evasions?
Right.
Yeah.
So then it became a trick for her to do the 2 tempi changes, but to keep the horse on the lead for 2. But I sort of digress. But the point is that as the crowds grew, watching dressage...
We're back in the late 80s, early 90s.
Right.
Now.
As we're growing... So then we got bigger crowds. So now we have commercialism coming into it to say, well, we have a lot of people in this stadium now. We can sell them some stuff. We could actually televise this for the people who actually can't make it to Barcelona or wherever the competition was. We can televise it. We can sell ad space. We can have a fair where we're selling merchandise. So it becomes and we can actually now sell our horses that we're breeding for more money. And as you see, people, there was a time I can remember when people thought $200,000-$300,000 for a top quality horse was, outlandish. And I remember when it was $500,000. Oh my goodness. And then when it was $1 million per horse, it was like the first horse to be bought for $1 million without training. Now this is just sort of accepted. And that is not due to inflation. If you do the math, it's not inflation. So putting the musical freestyle and drawing crowds, huge crowds that applaud, puts a kind of pressure on, now we have pleased the crowd. So where else have we seen this? We've seen this in the Roman Coliseum, right? We've seen it in the Coliseum when there was a bloodthirsty events, and the more fantastical, the more crazy things became, the more the crowd got excited. So, and this is an uneducated crowd. Those people that were cheering in the stands in the Roman Coliseum times, they were not doing it out of experience. Oh, I've been there. Yes, let's just have him killed by some lions. They were not. They were just, standing safely.
Damnatio al bestia.
Yeah, I'm standing safely behind the barrier. So, unfortunately, the judges and they even have arguments between the judges, and we have booing when the score is not high enough, when there's oohs and ahs. So there is a kind of pressure coming from the crowd. And if we think back to how competition began in the early part of the 20th century, it was just a bunch of military guys getting together, just saying, okay, how's the French group doing, and how's the German group doing, and the Danish and the Americans, and let's just put everybody together. And it was only men back then, and everyone was in their uniform, and it's just say, who's got the best dressage, and we have to make a jury that is international. We have to make the judges be like one from America, one from Germany, one from Denmark, one from Switzerland, one, and so on, one from France, so that we don't have the judges tipped in one's favor. So what happens is, in my view, that the crowd becomes less educated, the crowd becomes bigger, the operation becomes way more commercialized, much more about sponsorship, and the riders and the trainers are trying to differentiate themselves and stand out. And they're trying to stand out by bigger, more exaggerated, more spectacular movements. Well, there are more spectacular movements, but they're not these spectacular movements. They're very eye-catching, with a horse's front legs moving in this very exaggerated movement, right? But not necessarily connected to the back end of the horse. It's great for the crowd and not so great for the horse, right? And so then we see also the evolution, the necessary evolution of the saddles. If you look at Dr. Klimke's saddle, he's riding in, a Passier or a Kiefer with flat flaps. He doesn't need anything to keep him in the saddle. Because, why? He's not out of style. He's riding a horse's back that is swinging because the front legs and the hind legs are coordinating. They're working in unison. They're working in a united, similar way. That's why it cannot look exaggerated. Because if the front leg comes up above the chest, what is the hind leg going to do to parallel that? It's actually going to hit the horse's abdomen. It can't go as high. There's a limit to how far with the hind leg joints that hind leg can do. So we have, in a way, accepted non-parallel movement of the front legs and the back legs. And in order to make this happen, the horse's back must be depressed. When the horse's back is depressed, the back does not act as a shock absorber. The back acts as a shock imparter to the rider. So the rider is not really sitting on a sittable trot. If a rider can't sit the trot, we have to ask ourselves, okay, does the rider just have a bad seat, or is that trot truly not sittable? Well, if the back is not swinging softly, which that's in the German training tree, if it's not sittable, then we need a thigh block and a deep dish seat to hold the rider into this jarring movement, because the horse's back is no longer blanketing and absorbing the shock through his entire body. And as a result, you have dressage horses that have a shorter and shorter usable lifespan in this hybrid competition sense.
It's so true. When I was a boy, 8,000 years ago, the average age of a Grand Prix horse was about 14, and now it's 7 or something like that.
Well, they're making a rule now, I think, where it can't be 7, and it may be somewhere around 8 or 9. But they've actually made a move where you can't show up with a 7-year-old horse.
Right, but for a while they absolutely were.
Oh, and they will train them to Grand Prix
for sure.
At 7, and then not bring them to the competition until they're of a qualifying age.
Yeah.
So,
and the cartilage just can't stand up to that. Yeah.
This hyper movement that uneducated people got their eyes widened by, this is really, and that got favored, then breeders started to follow that. And now we've seen the horse not bred for stamina, not bred for something that can hold up and be ridden until it's 20, 22, 24 years old and ridden, and the retirement age being advanced into mid-20s. We just want something that's super light, and where these front limbs are super light, but that allow for a very exaggerated movement. And I think the breeding has actually followed that.
So
not in all breeds, of course.
The question then is this kind of crude half halt that we're seeing, this kind of cranking on the outside rein as a handbrake with this use of the inside leg almost like as a gas pedal at the same time. We know that what that will do if you drive a car, for example, if you crank the brake and
blue smoke will come out of the back.
Your clutch isn't going to hold up, right? Yeah. And
it says on the directions of every car, don't drive with the handbrake all the way up, otherwise blue smoke will come out, and your husband or wife who co-owns the car with you will regret that when you park it on a hill.
Indeed. So now we have horses breaking down, and we have riders being told that they have to do this. And what's the word in German? They call it the Bewegungswunder, the movement miracle type horses, where they're breeding these bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger moving horses that a lot of people just frankly cannot sit. And as you say, all sorts of hardware on the saddle to keep the person in place. And in a funny way, you could almost argue or ask the question, does the person almost have to kind of constantly do this just to manage this slightly unmanageable situation? Whether I'm sure people will argue about this, but the bottom line is this is now what we see. And it's alarming to me because we just spent, some years living and training and working in Germany. And the thing is, the really good German riders, they're not like that. Like you still see the great, beautiful Klimke style riders. You absolutely do. So it's really not fair to say.
You can't say by country,
No,
this
you
country's
can't.
bad and that country's good.
But in America, and I think also in the UK, there has been a kind of an adoption of what people think of as a Dutch, German, harder style of riding, driving the horse into the bridle, cranking the handbrake, and that becoming the half halt, which is so far from where we began with what the half halt was. But that's not fair, really, to Holland and Germany, because you do have these wonderful light riders.
You could have it anywhere. You could have good riding in any country, and you can have terrible riding.
But you know how it is. If you're sitting in the suburbs of Birmingham, where you're sitting in the suburbs of New York, and you say, I want to do this dressage thing, you would look at those super exaggerated
riders. You go to
riders,
a public competition,
and you'd say, that must be what I should do, because those are who's getting the high marks. I'm going to look for a trainer that does that. It's not your fault. You don't know any better. Next thing you know, you spent all this money on this crazy difficult horse to ride, and you're being told to crank, 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 and that is what a half halt is. And you just don't know, so you try to do this. So it's almost like a massacre of the innocents, in that you see people in kind of good faith trying to step up to learn this dressage thing, and you see the horses kind of being bred and bred and bred for this, as you said, more and more exaggerated stuff, and it's resulting in, I think, unhappiness all around.
And I think what happens is, if we have to say what is the problem? The problem is that with this mannered, over-exaggerated front that doesn't match what's going on behind, then the connective tissue, the connective member, which is the horse's back, the back is not being used correctly. And the most important use of the back, the first use of the back for a riding horse, is the back must carry the rider.
There's a monkey sitting up there. Yeah.
Because we all weigh something. So this is what is overlooked.
Speak for yourself, sir.
We all weigh something. So, and we are a burden to the horse.
Yeah, we are.
Because the horse was not meant to carry our weight.
Yeah.
And so we need to teach the horse how to reunite the front end and the back end, despite the fact that he has
a big old monkey sitting there.
A weight sitting on top of him. And this is why the half halt and the drive, or the leg aid and the hand aid, are not coordinatable.
Right.
If that's a word. They don't relate to one another because the bridge is lost. Okay? So the bridge between the front and the back, and this is what we sacrifice.
So I would ask, the question is, how do we not fall into that trap? If you remember back in our second video, you were explaining, we were talking about Mr. Steinbrecht, and we were interpreting his use of the inside leg to the outside rein as a softening aid that also allowed for the forward motion of the horse, and didn't hinder the hind end, didn't hinder the shoulder. And one could really say it was the use of soft moments of shoulder in the fluid forward moment. Is that what we need to get back to?
Well, I think the idea, and it's a kind of a bad English word, but the idea of throughness, right? Or the horse being connected from back to front, and the rider being cultured and taught. This is a very subtle feeling, because you're feeling this with all parts of your body. You're feeling it arguably with your backside. You're feeling it with your legs. You're feeling it a little bit in your hands. You're feeling it through your whole body. And if you've never felt it before, or if you only sat on a horse with a dropped back, and you haven't learned how to, or been introduced to the idea of lifting the thoracic sling, or having the horse go on its abdominal grid gymnastically and elevate and stretch the back, if we don't have this is what must be taught. This has to be taught before a half halt can go through. It has to be taught before a drive can go through, before even our weight can be carried. This is the first thing that we have to
That
do.
point, let me pick up on that point, 'cause that's very good. That's where I think the in-hand work is so invaluable, that when you start working with the in-hand work using the bridle reins really comes in, because when, let's say the horse is going that way,
Tracking left.
that would be my outside rein coming over from that side. This would be my inside rein here. My finger down by the girth here is my inside leg. And my thumb here, just that motion alone, is the balancer on the outside rein. It's so small you can barely see it, but it goes bonk, 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 softening and supporting. And you were brought up this French word in, I think, the first video, appui, to support, that people are often not taught that one of the jobs of the outside rein is to support the horse.
Laterally, yes.
Indeed, and not to make him break, not to make him yield, not to dominate him, but to make the process pleasurable for him, that, as you say, he can then feel how to organize himself to carry the monkey before we put the monkey up there, and to understand this inside leg to outside rein softening process that we're now coming to understand as a half halt, long before we place the monkey on top. And then if the monkey was also learning just something quite subtle here, okay, and then eventually I'm going to isolate what I'm doing with my finger and my thumb to what I'm doing with my leg and my elbow and my weight, don't forget the weight, as you said, then you've got a kind of a fluid learning curve, haven't you, where instead of things being done somewhat forcibly, instead of opposition to this big juggernaut going forward, you've got a growing understanding between pony and monkey that they can organize themselves together this way. And so by the time they're called upon to kind of execute that balancing thing, they sort of understand the concept.
Balancing and carrying.
Right.
So I'll always say to riders, when any rider mounts the horse, if you really watch the horse standing there with no rider on its back, and now we have the rider mount into the saddle, you can disagree with me, but I would say that every horse,
dream of disagreeing with you.
Every horse has a contraction of the back that happens because they're responding to the weight. And so initially what happens is the horse's back muscles contract because they're like, oh my goodness. The horse doesn't even say this mentally, physically. So then we, as a good rider, is going to say, okay, I recognize, I notice that these back muscles, while I was sitting here at the halt, they got a little bit tense in response to my poundage or your poundage. So then what we want to do is put the horse in a position and say, okay, you can actually lift my weight by contracting your abdominal grid, your iliopsoas abdominal grid, and you can actually stretch your back muscles and raise it, which is not the horse's first instinct.
Right, and the half halt can help to do this.
Yeah, right,
absolutely.
even there at the halt.
Yeah.
But the application of the aids and the application of the soft rounding, this tells the horse the first position to say, okay, don't be threatened by my weight. Here's a way that you can carry your weight. And from the horse's point of view, when the horse is running around in the pasture, the horse does not need to know how to carry weight on its back. When it's running around the pasture, having a roll, running up to get some hay, going down to the shady part, going to hang out with its friend, it never needs to know how to carry any weight on its back because it never has to do it. So it is our obligation because it is our idea. It's our idea. Hey, I would like to ride you. It's faster and easier for me than jogging 7 miles down to the store.
Which is why we've got to look after our horse's topline muscles, lads.
Right.
And lots and lots of lunging and all that stuff, because that's where you sit. That's where that horse has to carry us. And when we got monkey butt up there, that's a challenge for the horse. That's a challenge for any horse.
So it comes down to topline hygiene. What is the hygiene? You know, what is the characteristic, how healthy are those muscles?
Yes.
Can they stretch? Are they strong? Are they supple? Are they rigid?
Have we built them as the horse is young in anticipation of that rider? And then as the horse ages, are we looking after that as well? Because there's always going to be a certain amount of muscle loss as any organism ages, right?
Yeah.
So we need to be thinking about that a lot in the course of our horse care. Otherwise, something like a half halt is of no relevance.
And another thing that I observed with the in-hand work is basically you ask, what's nice about it, there's no weight on the horse's back. So we're showing the horse the shape. And without this counter influence of something pushing the back down, right? So when the rider's fumbling about or not effectively creating this nice carriage position, this carrying position, but then there isn't a cost. There's not a huge expense. And when the rider fumbles in the in-hand work, the rider always has his or her feet on the ground. You can always go back to your own ground, right? So, and you know that that's not expensive from the horse's physiological.
It's not going to cause entropy. It's not going to destroy muscle fiber.
It's not going to say, oh, well, I'm messing about here and my horse's back is suffering now. Oh, I'm messing about. Let me just regroup, and I reset myself on the ground. And so the rider gets better and better and better. When I was working with your horses, I'm like, oh, well, I've really kind of confused myself, if not confused the horse for this. Let me just regroup. Oh, yes, now I have it back together. But I didn't feel badly about this because it wasn't expensive physically.
You're talking about when you were working with them in hand.
Yes, I was working with them in hand.
Absolutely. Yeah, so this is really, I think, as we head towards the conclusion of this video, if you really want to understand this business of half halts, training in general, and building horses and maintaining horses and looking after horses and rehabbing horses, we always got to ask ourselves, what's the experience of the horse around the monkey? And are we just destroying the horse in order to, win a point or make some money? Or is the process of the riding and the training actually pleasurable for the horse? Is it building the horse? Is it more like a yoga? Is it some kind of yoga martial arts hybrid, which we know is likely to be quite good for us? Or is it, as you were saying, expensive for the horse's energy, possibly also for the rider when things are really hard, and destroying both at the same time? I think we know which one we'd like to be. We'd like to be on that rehab, supporting, maintaining end. So if we go back to, to the very beginning of these old dead dudes, what they were doing, of course, was relying upon armies of grooms to do a lot of that work in hand and a lot of that lunging work. And this is why it gets a bit confusing when you're reading their books, because they're often not talking about it, because they had all these teams doing it. But we have to be both groom and gentleman. We have to take care of all those jobs together, and we have to understand that for the benefit and welfare of our horses, all right? So we certainly don't want to think of a half halt as a cranking on the handbrake and a stepping on the gas pedal. It's so useful to go back to these books that Richard's been publishing to look at how they've been used as softening and balancing and helping the horse. Not saying, too much, too fast, stay with me. No, helping the horse to figure out how to do something that's actually going to be of benefit to itself with that monkey up there. So I would posit really that where we should leave this is we kind of want to get back to that Steinbrecht idea, which you were elucidating so well in our second video, and to really understand and look at the shoulder in. And if you're going to look at the shoulder in to understand these things, you need to understand it in hand. And we also need to go back to chapter 11, I think it is, of this book.
Or 12.
Yes, which is where La Guérinière gets his fame, because he's the one who really emphasizes all the benefits of the shoulder in. And then, of course, just over here, you've got Master Nuno Oliveira, who we can, if he sits on the right hand of God, a lot of people think this dude was God. But he's also saying that if you said, what is it, that La Guérinière says that the shoulder in is the alpha and omega and of riding, and this guy says it's the aspirin of riding because it fixes everything.
And the other thing Nuno Oliveira says is like there is a 1/8 shoulder in or a shoulder 4. There's a quarter shoulder in, there's a half shoulder in, there's a 5/8 shoulder in. They're all sorts of degrees.
There are nuances.
Yeah.
And La Guérinière says the same thing about the half halt, by the way. He's saying that there is these different types of half halt.
So
different types.
somebody would ask, well, am I doing the half halt correctly? And I would always say, you do there are as many different half halts as the times that you do the half halts. For me, it's not exactly the same every time. It is informed by feel.
And does it feel like it's a softening, balancing, helping with the carrying thing, or doesn't it?
So you're always asking yourself, what is my precondition? What is my precondition for the half halt? And know that the horse is not trying to lean on your hand. The horse is just trying to make his way. He's just trying to figure it out.
While carrying monkey butt.
Yeah. What do I do? Do I lean on the hand? I don't know. The horse isn't even thinking this. The horse is just feeling his way through life. So you analyze and say, well, I think things could be better. Let's see if I deliver this kind of half halt. Now let me look at the result. Do I have a better situation after the half halt? Is it slightly better? Is it worse? Is it the same? And I think this rider evaluation, this is how you go by feel. You're honest about the way it is before, you're honest about your process, and then you're honestly comparing your aftermath to the before math, right? And that's how you decide, is it working? Because often I'll have students say, well, am I doing this right? And I will just say, well, we have to see, we have to ask your horse. The horse knows the answer.
Yeah. Some preconditions, if you're feeling confused at this point, friends, is understanding the shoulder in means also understanding what Richard was talking about, this thing of indirect rein, which is, of course, what La Guérinière is talking about this movement here of the inside hand, rather than this, or making some wall with your finger, or some big backward movement of your elbow. So understanding how to soften and support. This is the sort of key ingredient in one's mind as a concept. And luckily, all these dead dudes that you've been publishing write about it extensively. And if we can understand it on the ground in hand, as you say, without the horse having to bear weight, and then as the horse is bearing weight, kind of apply those principles, then we have a sporting chance of applying these moments of shoulders in a fluid way that sort of allow the horse to get the best out of the experience of carrying monkeys around. I'd say that if you want to, therefore, explore the world of the half halt further, please avail yourself of the library of books published by this gentleman here. Read your La Guérinière, read your Steinbrecht, read your Oliveira. And you have to reread it and reread it, because as many times as I've read some of these volumes, as slim as they are, they're so packed with incredible information that you just kind of live your life reading these things. And then together, we get together and we have these conversations either verbally or, as we've been doing in the last few days, actually with horses, right, where we're not trying to train and we're not trying to teach. What we're doing is we're conversing and taking pleasure.
Yeah, I go to Rupert and I say, well, what do you think? This is kind of what I think. I suppose this. Do you agree with that? And so the other thing that you need to
we're like nerds in the laboratory, you know?
Right. And so he's not telling me what to do. I'm not telling him what to do. We're conversing, and then the two minds are kind of like gelling. And this is just the age-old lesson that correct horsemanship happens in a community of like-minded people.
Tribe, my friends,
it's not
tribe.
Important who's better, who knows more, who's a better rider, who's a better ground person. It's more important, like, are we all on a likewise path?
And are we enjoying it?
Right.
Does this feel pleasurable, this whole exercise?
Does the horse have a good affect?
Yes.
Is the horse enjoying this? Is the horse looking happy while he's being ridden?
Is the horse kind of want to hang out with us at the end of the session?
Right.
Or is the horse
running away?
You know? Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Thank you for your attention.
So, hey, my friends, listen, you've hung with us through these 3 videos on the half halt. We are really, really grateful for this. I can't emphasize enough my gratitude to Richard Williams for helping to make sure that the canon of training that we need to adhere to from down the centuries in our civilization, that this doesn't die, and that we can continue to promulgate this culture and live this culture. Don't think of it as a sport, lads. Don't think of it as a hobby. Don't think of it as training. Think of it as entertaining your horse. Think of it as conversing with your friends and your horses. Do we all seem to be gaining pleasure from this exercise? Do we all, whether we've got 2 legs or 4 legs, do we all seem to be benefiting from it? If so, then we're probably on the right path. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah. Joy, fun.
Joy. That thing that's missing from the training scale. I think can feel another video coming on here.
Yeah.
So if this was of any interest to you, if you found this helpful, if you found this useful, if you found it entertaining, please like it, subscribe, because that will tell the YouTube algorithm that they should be putting more of these things out there, and we need more of this stuff out there. Do check out Xenophon Press. They are basically the only people out there publishing all this stuff that we all desperately rely upon to work from, and amazingly, they do it cheaply. These books are like $35. They're not expensive, and no, they don't sponsor this video series, but I kind of want to sponsor them because they are doing such incredible work. If you want to learn more about this stuff, particularly the in-hand work and how that can build towards the riding work, do click on that link below and take our free intro course on longridehome.com. And if you want to come and play with us and our ponies in person and work together and have these lovely conversations with the horses, then you can, of course, do that. You just have to go on the website, longridehome.com. There's an email link. Send us an email. We'll make a plan. All right? Till the next time, lads, keep rocking.